What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Odd Shopper channel. Today, we're talking college basketball bets ahead of Super Tuesday, January the 23rd. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We are brought to you by BetMGM, and they have a limited time offer for those of you in all legal states except New York, Puerto Rico, and Nevada. What you'll do is click the link in the video description below. Make your first deposit of at least $5. Make your first wager of at least $5. Any team, any market. Whether that bet wins or loses, you will get 158 in the form of bonus bets. You must be 21 or older in most states. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. But I can guarantee you these deals are for a limited time. Take advantage of them while you can. All right, quick recap before we head to the games today. Went 0-3 yesterday, so just a brutal run out. Gave back basically all the money we had from a very good weekend, or close to it. To recap quickly, was on Wake Forest plus 8.5. It moved to 7.5, so got decent closing line value, but that won't feed your family. It's a signal. Doesn't mean you were right. And we weren't. Wake Forest took a bunch of horrific threes. I mean, this team is excellent at shooting threes, but you're not going to win taking contested threes really early in the shot clock against a North Carolina team who was awesome defensively. Got to give them credit. They're looking really good right now. But Wake Forest certainly did not do themselves any favors, nor did McNeese State, missing a ton of free throws. And it was funny at the end of the game, a missed free throws actually what gave them the chance for that last second tip in. But that team was down 18. They didn't have any business winning, so I'm not going to come out here and say that should have won. But yeah, we move forward to today's games. And we're going to kick things off with Kentucky taking on South Carolina. So here we have, let's see, got to add this to the screen. All right. Kentucky taking on South Carolina. This game has a 4.5-point spread, which I'm very interested in. I think it's one of the better numbers on the board today. Kentucky's peaking at the right time. They've gotten beat a couple times. But this team is getting eligible, I guess is the right word. Ivisic came back to their last game, big 7'2" center who had eligibility issues. But this team is peaking at the right time. There's no other way to get around this very young team. It was going to take some time to gel. But here they are, and they're third in offensive efficiency, 99th on defense. We'll talk about that in a second. Facing a South Carolina team who's 15-3, but they haven't played a difficult schedule outside the top 160 in strength of schedule. And they're going to be at a massive disadvantage inside in this game, as most teams are going against Kentucky now in the near future. South Carolina's 201st in height. With Ivisic back, this Kentucky lineup is so unique. You have Ivisic at 7'2", Aaron Bradshaw at 7'1", Ugena Onyeso at 7 feet. You have 3 7-footers that are going to play for this team. And they've done a lot of interesting things with their personnel. They were kicking Bradshaw to the 4 last game, playing with 2 7-footers on the court at the same time. And that doesn't even include some of their other players. Trey Mitchell's 6'9". Justin Edwards is 6'8". This team can play a lineup that has 4 players above 6'6". When you move Antonio Reeves to the 2, use stuff like that. There's just no way the South Carolina team is going to be able to score inside against Kentucky. And even if Kentucky doesn't have success, it takes a little bit of time for these 7-footers to play with each other. They're an elite shooting team. Reed Shepard, Antonio Reeves, and Rob Dillingham are all hitting at least 39% from 3. On the other side, South Carolina is a pretty decent shooting team. They play really slow, which is going to be their best path here. It's tough against Kentucky, who plays at the speed of light. But you need to slow teams down, shoot over the top of them, especially with the 3 7-footers for this team. Unfortunately, they lost Miles Stute, their second-best three-point shooter, hitting them at 39%. They still have Michi Johnson, 37% three-point shooter, Talon Cooper, 42%. So not all hope is lost, just most of it. 4.5, I think, is a very generous number against South Carolina, who's a team that is a bit of a sell high. So that is one we already locked in and took. All right, second game, we move to Wisconsin taking on Minnesota. And this is a game that has a 3.5-point spread in favor of the road team, Wisconsin. I'm interested in this. We'll talk about it in a second. I think there's reasons you might want to wait, but I think Wisconsin is the superior team here, both in offensive and defensive efficiency. They match up well against Minnesota, who does have some decent height, but Wisconsin has Stephen Krull and Tyler Wall. Going to play very slow, so that doesn't always work in their favor when you're covering spreads. But the spread has moved in Minnesota's favor. I don't agree with that. And part of the reason is their best offensive playmaker, Elijah Hawkins, is entering this game as a game-time decision. He has an ankle injury, and he flat out might not play in this game, missed their last one. And if he does, how healthy is he? This is by far their best scorer, especially when you look to shot creators, perimeter scoring. This team has Dawson Garcia. That's great. He's actually been the best big at avoiding fouls, which I think is going to be really important in this game. Wisconsin's fifth at generating them. But that's just one player. I'm not buying the Ola Joseph, or the Farrell Plain experiments we've seen. These are players that routinely get in foul trouble. Wisconsin's fifth in the country at generating fouls, especially on the interior with Kroll and Wall. Joshua Ola Joseph and Farrell Payne are limited big men. At least Dawson Garcia gives you some three-point making ability. He's not shooting them well this year. 21% is actually atrocious. And he'll be somewhat difficult to deal with inside. I honestly think Wisconsin's defense has a little bit of meat left on the bone. When you look at this team, they're 77th in total defensive efficiency. They're 229th inside. Wall's played awesome. Kroll needs to play better. Just flat out no way around it. But I think there's ways that they can dedicate extra resources to that, especially with Hawkins limited. And then Wisconsin, what they lacked last year and what they have this year is just offensive scoring outside of their bigs. Chucky Hepburn still is what he is, more of a facilitator than a scorer. But you have Klesmit shooting over 40% from three. When you look at just offensive rating for these players, AJ Storr coming in for St. John's has the second highest offensive rating on the team. Now, they haven't needed to play him full minutes, but that's positive that he's providing a spark on offense, which Wisconsin has lacked at times. Minnesota's 85th in defensive efficiency, not good, not great. They will allow threes, which is a strength of Wisconsin this year, especially with Klesmit. So this is one I do like the Badgers, -3.5. Now, I think there is some merit to waiting on this. If Hawkins plays, I would not be as interested. So if you want to take this all the way up to tip-off, see if Minnesota is going to warm up Hawkins, anything like that, I think that's a strategy you can employ. I already took the 3.5 for those of you that are wondering, but play around with it, see what you can do late in the day. All right. Our third game, we go to Florida State taking on Syracuse. This is one I like a total, and it's currently sitting at 150. It's taken money towards the over, saw it at 149. I think this is one that's still relatively efficient, but if you want to wait and see where it goes, I could see that as well. Basically, these teams are both extremely fast. When you look on the season, Florida State 50th in tempo, Syracuse is 48th. If you isolate conference play and look to just the last month and a half, Florida State has jumped to 35th in tempo, Syracuse is 36th. So these teams are playing even faster than they have regularly. And they're both teams that mess with their rotations a little bit. Florida State, they play that notorious deep bench. But Syracuse, they've ebbed and flowed minutes throughout the year for some of the players. One guy in particular, they have given increased minutes of late is Malik Brown, which I think has helped this team a ton, especially on the interior, where Florida State has shown a little bit of weakness. Both teams honestly have a little bit of weakness inside. But Malik Brown, he has the second highest offensive efficiency rating on this team, and he's getting more minutes, and deservedly so. The injury to McLeod has actually indirectly helped them figure out who their better players are, especially in the offensive end. But this mainly comes down to pacing. Both teams are pretty good on defense. Again, I think you can win inside with both these teams. Florida State, they're 188th in interior defense. Syracuse is 215th, especially with, like Malik Brown playing more. You're getting decent play out of Jameer Watkins. There's a lot of ways these teams can score points. And they're also excellent teams at forcing turnovers. We're talking 2 top 40 teams, turnovers forced. So there's the opportunity for points in transition here as well. All this is just kind of icing on the cake when you talk about 2 top 50 tempos and 2 teams that have jumped into the top 40 since conference play started. So we'll back and over here. This is one I already took. You want to wait on it, that is fine as well. Next game, we have Ohio State taking on Nebraska. This is one I planned to talk about before the show, but honestly, I've liked it less and less throughout the day as we've dove in. And basically, with this game, they're both pretty efficient teams. I was surprised how bad Nebraska's been on defense. And if you want to look to even just like recent play, because sometimes, especially in Nebraska, they didn't start out the year healthy. They didn't have Tominaga, and Gary's been hurt. But if you isolate the last month and a half, they're still 112th in defensive efficiency. So this number you see on the screen, 109, that hasn't gotten any better now that their guys are back. So I don't know. They can score, though. I do worry with Ohio State and their interior. I love Felix Akpar. He's been awesome, blocking machine. He's still a player that has historically struggled with fouls, which the only player that really generates a lot of fouls on Ohio State on Nebraska is Josiah Alec. You have Vernick Mass. He only generates 2.9 fouls per 40 minutes. Gary only generates 3.2, and I think he's the biggest hesitation for me on the Nebraska side. The 6'6", 3'4", whatever you want to call him, he's been out, and I don't know what the deal is. He has the calf strain, and he comes off the court without bearing any weight on his leg, like he just tore his ACL. Cowardly behavior, but apparently he got in a non-contact practice yesterday, and he's a game-time decision for this contest. I don't think he plays, but if you think Juwan Gary gets out there or he's warming up or something, I do think Nebraska's interesting. This team can score, and I think they've run pretty well, whereas Ohio State has run like the sun in conference play. So like at a 2.5, which isn't available anymore, I do have interest in Nebraska. With Ohio State, I would have interest if you could get like a 3.5 and Juwan Gary's out. So honestly, this is one I'm probably going to take right up until game time. No real reason to talk about it any further at this point. Just one we need more information on. Next up, we have TCU taking on Oklahoma State. And this is one that's, I think, pretty interesting in this conference. Oklahoma State largely viewed as the worst team, and I understand it. I get it. They've actually played a little better than I thought, and it seems like they're a positive regression candidate. They're 179th in offensive efficiency, 60th on defense. But you look at this team, like their effective field goal percentage, it's actually not that bad, which was a bit of a surprise. They're 79th in effective field goal percentage, where TCU is 53rd. The problem here is I still worry about this team. They're playing at home, which hasn't mattered a ton to them. But TCU is a team that's played extremely well this year, been pleasantly surprised by them. Overall, their metrics, top 50 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. They played the 124th most difficult schedule. They're 53rd in effective field goal percentage. Awesome inside, 43rd overall with Emmanuel Miller. And they're not great from three. They don't shoot a ton of them. They definitely prioritize playing inside, but they're a good defensive team. And they're 43rd at defending threes. That's the main worry when you face Oklahoma State, who's actually shooting a lot of threes, and they're 85th in three-point percentage. So having that defense, I think, is going to be actually pretty key to this TCU team. This is one I think is very close to efficient, but if you can get this at a 4, I am willing to play it. I'll play it myself. You've got a bunch of great defenders on this team. It's not going to be easy for Oklahoma State to score in this matchup. Next one, we have Butler taking on Georgetown. Matchup with a 3-point spread in favor of the road team. My kryptonite has been backing a lot of these road teams, which it seems like it's going to be the case again today. Follow at your own peril, but this is one I think is interesting. Georgetown has messed with their rotation a little bit. They bench Rowan Brumbaugh. Butler's a team that I've been buying throughout most of the season, and their metrics line up here. 48th in offensive efficiency, 87th on defense. That's where they have a huge advantage over Georgetown, who's 257th on defense. The rebounding here is actually pretty tight, but I think there's a lot of meat left on the bone for Butler. 177th in rebounding. They're 63rd in height. Georgetown is 127th. And Georgetown's bigs are a bunch of bozos. Supreme Cook has been fine, but anytime you have to get like Mutombo on the court, anything like that, you should just be licking your lips as an opposing team's backer. And right away, Butler, with their scoring, should have no problem getting this done, in my opinion. You can look at the shooting for this team. It's been fine. Pierre Brooks is shooting 43%. On the interior, Julian Telford has been pretty good for this team. Had a couple bad games, so hopefully he can bounce back. And then they're kind of rotating that 5 position between Jalen Thomas, who's dealt with fouls, and Andre Screen, 7'1" big, who's kind of a big stiff. But Georgetown doesn't have much inside to take advantage of this. So I think this is a big advantage that we could potentially look to. Supreme Cook, he generates a lot of fouls, but I don't see this being a huge issue. And then, of course, you've got Jaden Epps on the other side, who's taking a bunch of inefficient shots and playing every single minute for Georgetown. They're at home. They played a couple teams close of late. Most recently, they had that barn burner against Xavier. They were leading the whole game, but lost by 1. Prior to that, demolished by UConn, lost to Seton Hall by 4. So they have played better. But with Butler, I think you get a little bit of a buy low spot, especially after they had 2 straight losses and they got a get right spot against DePaul. Next up, Pitt and Georgia Tech. This is a game where I like the under. So in this contest, you have 2 teams that are already pretty slow in terms of pace. With Pittsburgh, they're 239th in adjusted tempo. Georgia Tech is 201st. When you go to recent play, I'm going to pull this up. Self-producing shows is not easy. Last month, Georgia Tech has dropped to 246th in tempo, and Pittsburgh has dropped to 321st. So right away, that's the crux of this argument. You have a defensive team in Pittsburgh who's 50th overall. Georgia Tech is 154th. And with Georgia Tech, that hasn't gotten much better. They're 163rd over the last month. But they're the team that also will struggle to score at times. When you dive into the actual weeds of both of these teams, Georgia Tech's 211th in effective field goal percentage. They're not great on the interior. They're 152nd there. They have the 248th ranked three-point percentage in the country. So, I mean, this team doesn't score very well. When they do, coming on the interior, that's not going to be easy against Pittsburgh, who has a pretty good roster on the inside. This Pitt Panthers team comes in with decent height. You have Blake Hinson at 6'8", a veteran, and then they rotate the 5 a lot. Guillermo Diaz-Graham plays a bit. Jorge Diaz-Graham, Frederico. That's 3 players that are all at least 6'11", so you have depth there. If one of them gets in foul trouble, it's not the end of the world. Zach Austin, who plays the 3, is 6'7" for this team, so you're going to have height advantages Pitt's direction. They're 13th in effective height. Georgia Tech is 168th, which for a team that wins through interior scoring, being 168th in effective height and facing Pittsburgh, who has excellent defense, is going to be a big issue for this team. So with pacing being so atrocious, you're relying on offensive efficiency for 2 teams that are right around the top 100 in offensive efficiency. Under 145, completely fine for me. Couple games left. Our next one, let's see here. Never mind. This was our last game. My bad. Sorry, guys. All right. Thought we had one more, but we hit them all. If you have a comment, a question, reach out to me on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. We'll be back tomorrow trying to iron out some more kinks. The self-produced show is a bit of an experiment. Had to do timestamps, so that's why it was a little bit of pausing. But hopefully we get back on the horse. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you very much. Until next time, good luck. We'll see you later.